The film opens with a man swimming out in the sea. While moving through the water, he spots an old chest resting beneath the surface. A moment later, the trunk breaks open, and several objects begin drifting out. Among them is a strange green mask. It slowly floats upward until it reaches the top of the water. The scene ends there. Now we are introduced to Stanley, an ordinary man who works in a bank. He is gentle, simple, and a little too innocent for his own good. At work, he speaks to a female coworker and tells her that he has 2 tickets for a special event. He asks her if she would like to go with him. Instead of accepting his invitation properly, she says that her friend really enjoys that type of event and has already bought tickets. Then she casually asks Stanley if he can give her both tickets instead. Stanley, being too soft-hearted and unable to say no, hands over both tickets to her. Because of this, he does not get to attend the event himself. After she leaves, Stanley's friend comes over and notices what has happened. He tells Stanley that people keep taking advantage of him and that he never seems to understand it. While the two are talking, a beautiful woman enters the bank. Her name is Tina. She walks up to Stanley's counter, places her bag down, and begins speaking to him. She says she wants to open a bank account. At first, everything looks normal, but Tina is not just an ordinary customer. Inside her bag, there is a hidden camera. While she talks to Stanley, the camera secretly records the inside of the bank, including the layout and surroundings. Usually, people do this kind of thing when they are preparing for a robbery. And in this case, that is exactly what is happening. Tina has been sent by her boyfriend because he is planning to rob the bank. Stanley, of course, has no idea about any of this. Instead, Stanley is completely charmed by Tina. After she leaves, he cannot stop thinking about her. He tells his friend how beautiful she was. His friend tells him to stop dreaming about her and forget it. Then he reminds Stanley that there is a party tonight and says they should both go there. Suddenly, Stanley remembers that his car is not working, so he goes to the repair shop to check on it. But the mechanics tell him that they cannot fix it right away. One of them then says that if Stanley is really in a hurry, he can take his car instead. Stanley does not have many options, so he agrees, even though the car he is given is in awful condition. It looks old, damaged, and embarrassing to drive. Still, Stanley takes that broken-down car and heads toward the place his friend told him about. But when he reaches there, the guards stop him at the entrance. They recognize him and refuse to let him in. They basically make it clear that someone like him is not welcome there. Stanley feels deeply embarrassed and humiliated. With no other choice, he leaves in the same terrible car. While driving back, the car breaks down on a bridge. Stanley becomes frustrated and steps out. It is midnight, and there is no one around to help him. As he stands there helplessly, he looks down toward the water. Suddenly, he sees something floating below. At first glance, it looks like a body. Because Stanley is a good-hearted man, he immediately thinks someone might be in danger. Without thinking too much, he jumps into the water to save that person. But when he reaches it, he realizes it is not a body at all. It is just some junk floating together in a shape that looked human from above. However, Stanley does find something unusual there. It is the same green mask that floated up at the beginning of the film. The mask looks old, strange, and almost antique. Stanley becomes curious and takes it home with him. At home, Stanley has a dog. The moment the dog sees the mask, it starts barking loudly. It clearly does not like the object. Animals often sense danger before humans do, and here the dog seems to understand that there is something unnatural about this mask. Later that night, Stanley stands in front of the mirror while holding the mask. He looks at it with curiosity and decides to try it on just to see how it looks. But the second he places it on his face, the mask sticks tightly to him. He tries to remove it, but it will not come off. It feels as if the mask has fused with his skin. Suddenly, Stanley begins to transform. His face turns green, and his whole personality changes. He starts acting wildly, moving at impossible speed, dancing, twisting, and behaving in a completely bizarre way. He is still inside his apartment, but he is no longer the same quiet Stanley. When he steps outside his room, a woman sees him and becomes terrified. The funny thing is that she also has a green mask on her face, but hers is just a beauty mask for skincare. Stanley, on the other hand, looks like a living cartoon nightmare. The woman panics and almost shoots him, but Stanley reacts in a ridiculous way. He jumps out of the window and bounces away like a rubber ball. Now Stanley has become a strange, comical, superhuman version of himself. After landing on the street, he walks right in front of a car. The driver angrily honks at him, trying to make him move. But Stanley now seems to have all kinds of impossible objects in his pockets. He pulls out a small horn-shaped device. It looks harmless, like it might make a tiny sound. But when he presses it, the horn blasts so loudly that the car's windows shatter instantly. The sound is so powerful that Stanley's own hair shoots upward like sharp spikes. After this, Stanley remembers the repair shop that gave him that humiliating broken car. Still under the mask's strange influence, he goes there. Once he arrives, he causes total madness. He wrecks the place, flips things around, and creates complete chaos. After making a mess of everything, he eventually returns home and falls asleep, completely worn out from the insane night. The next morning, Stanley wakes up as his normal self again. His face is no longer green, and the mask is not on him. He looks into the mirror and slowly starts remembering pieces of what happened the night before. But the events are so unbelievable that he tries to convince himself it was only a dream. Then suddenly, someone knocks on his door. When Stanley opens it, a police officer is standing there. The same woman who saw him the previous night is also with the officer. The officer asks Stanley if he remembers anything unusual happening in his apartment last night. The woman explains that a terrifying man with a green face came into the hallway and scared her badly. Stanley realizes that she is talking about him, but he cannot admit it. So he tells the officer that he did not see anyone and that he was asleep the whole night. After the police finally leave, Stanley goes back inside. He picks up the mask, looks at it carefully, and begins to understand the truth. This strange object is the reason he did all those impossible and crazy things. Stanley looks down at the mask in his hands and mutters, "I should just get rid of this thing." He tosses it out of the room, hoping to finally be free of it. But inexplicably, the mask floats back inside on its own, almost as if it has a mind of its own. Later, Stanley drags himself into work, still shaken from the previous night. His managers are visibly irritated. "Why are you late today?" they demand. Stanley tries to explain, "I didn't sleep well last night," but it barely makes a dent in their scolding. Frustrated and worn down, he heads home, clutching a newspaper. As he flips through it, he discovers something intriguing. Tina, the mysterious woman from the bank, is actually a singer performing at a local bar. The same bar he had tried to enter the other night but was turned away from. Stanley immediately feels determined. "I have to go to that bar," he says to himself, though he knows he doesn't have the money for the ticket or for a decent ride there. That's when his gaze falls on the green mask resting on his sofa. For some reason, it feels almost like the mask understands him, like it might be willing to help. Remembering that he could never truly discard it, he decides, why not give it another try? Once again, Stanley dons the mask. The familiar green transformation spreads across his face, and he feels the surge of strange power coursing through him. Changing into new clothes, he sets off, not to the bar directly, but first to the bank. This time, his plan is audacious. He intends to grab some cash to fund both a luxury entry to the bar and a better car, since the old clunker had humiliated him so badly. In his world, respect comes with wealth, and Stanley is ready to bend the rules to earn it. Coincidentally, Tina's boyfriend and his crew arrive at the bank at the same time. They're plotting the very robbery Tina had instructed her accomplices to attempt. They survey the area meticulously, preparing for the heist that's about to unfold. Stanley, however, is already steps ahead. With a sudden smash, he shatters the bank's mirror and steps outside, confronting Tina's gang. "You're late," he yells. "You can't rob a bank like this." Before they can react, he disappears, moving so fast that he becomes little more than a green blur. The police soon arrive, drawn by the commotion outside the bank. They begin investigating Tina's group, convinced these are the people behind the attempted robbery. Meanwhile, Stanley has already reached the bar, cruising in style with a sleek, expensive car. At the entrance, he hands a stack of bills to the security, and finally, he is allowed inside. Inside the bar, Tina is on stage, dancing gracefully. Stanley joins her, matching her moves with flair. Tina, impressed, assumes he must be wealthy to arrive in such style, but their brief moment of fun is shattered when Tina's boyfriend shows up, flanked by his gang. "The man dancing with Tina, that's the bank robber," he shouts. Guns are drawn and chaos erupts, but Stanley, empowered by the mask, is untouchable. He dodges bullets with uncanny agility, bouncing and leaping around as if the laws of physics no longer apply. Moments later, the police storm the bar. They confront Tina's group and lecture them sternly. "We found your companions outside the bank earlier. We let them go. But now, you're here endangering lives." Shooting at people is a serious crime. The gang is promptly arrested. The leader warns, "You'll find out the truth only when you catch the man with the green face." Back at the bank, officers find a torn piece of a tie at the crime scene. Upon closer inspection, it matches Stanley's. They're baffled. How could a simple bank employee afford to be in a luxury bar, wearing fine clothes and driving an expensive car? The officer heads straight to Stanley's apartment for questioning. "Stanley," he asks, holding up the tie, "how did you get into that bar? You're not exactly rich." Stanley, thinking quickly, responds, "I didn't go to the bar. I was looking for my tie too." Someone stole it. Later, the pressure at the bank intensifies. Stanley's boss berates him again, pushing him to his limit. Finally, Stanley snaps, warning, "Don't be aggressive with me, or things might go badly." Soon after, Tina arrives at the bank, seeking Stanley out. She asks, "You meet so many people every day. Do you know a man with a green face?" She assumes someone had simply painted their face. Stanley doesn't reveal the truth but plays along. "Yes, I know him," he says. "If you want, I can arrange for you to meet him tonight." Tina lights up, thrilled, and agrees on the time and place. Determined to understand the mask fully, Stanley visits an expert in ancient artifacts. The scholar examines the mask and explains, "Long ago there were many gods. One of them, playful and mischievous, was immature and reckless. As punishment, he was given a mask and banished." Stanley holds up his mask. "This is that mask. Every time I wear it, I transform into something else." To prove it, Stanley tries wearing the mask in broad daylight, but nothing happens. The expert scoffs, dismissing him. "Don't waste my time." Stanley starts to suspect that the mask's magic only activates at night, or perhaps when he's alone. With evening approaching, he leaves, ready for his meeting with Tina. That night, Stanley dons the mask once more and heads toward the rendezvous. But just as he arrives, the police unexpectedly show up at the scene. The police had already been watching Stanley closely. They had tracked his movements and were waiting for the right moment to catch him. As soon as he arrives at the meeting spot, officers move in and surround the entire area. Tina sees the police closing in and immediately panics. Terrified of getting caught in the middle of everything, she runs away from the scene. Stanley, still wearing the mask, tries to think fast. In his strange, cartoonish state, he decides that if he stands completely still, maybe nobody will see him. He freezes in place like a statue, believing he has somehow become invisible. But of course, he is not invisible at all. He is standing right there in front of everyone, with his green face and ridiculous appearance fully visible to the police. Because of his childish and foolish behavior under the mask's influence, he does not even realize how obvious he looks. The officers waste no time and close in around him from all sides. They finally catch him, and Stanley reacts with a wild, exaggerated scream. The scream is so comical and powerful that it looks as if his skull pops out in a cartoon-like way. Even while being trapped, Stanley starts using his bizarre magical tricks again. He turns the serious police operation into total nonsense. Suddenly, the officers lose control and begin dancing along with him, almost as if his strange energy has taken over their bodies. Stanley uses this ridiculous distraction to escape. While the police are caught in the chaos, he slips away, runs across the street, and finally removes the mask. The transformation ends instantly, and he becomes the normal, nervous, ordinary Stanley once again. Just then, a woman driving by notices him. She recognizes Stanley because she is an old friend of his. Seeing him frightened and confused, she stops her car and quickly helps him inside. This woman is a reporter, and because Stanley is honest and trusting by nature, he believes he can safely tell her everything. He confesses the whole truth to her. He explains that he has found a strange mask, and when he wears it, it changes him into another version of himself. He tells her that this is why the police are after him. He believes she will understand and maybe even help him, but the situation takes a dark turn. This woman is not really helping Stanley out of kindness. She is secretly working with Tina's criminal gang. Tina's dangerous boyfriend has paid her a large amount of money to deliver Stanley to them, and she agrees because she wants the reward. Soon, Stanley is betrayed and captured. The criminals tie him up and treat him brutally. They even hang him upside down while interrogating him. Tina's evil boyfriend demands to know how the mask works. He threatens Stanley, saying that if he refuses to explain, they will kill him. Stanley, trying to stay alive and buy himself some time, gives a simple answer. He tells him, "Just put it on." It works by itself. The gang leader listens and wears the mask. The moment he puts it on, his face turns green too, but his transformation is nothing like Stanley's. When Stanley wore the mask, he became wild and funny, almost like a harmless cartoon character. But when this man wears it, he becomes darker, scarier, and far more dangerous. The mask reflects the evil inside him, turning him into a powerful villain. Now that he has tasted the mask's power, he becomes obsessed with it. He refuses to let anyone else touch it, but at the same time, he understands the risk. If the police see him with a green face, they might connect him to the bank robbery and all the chaos caused by the masked man. So he comes up with a plan to shift all the blame onto Stanley. He decides to place a fake mask on Stanley and make the police believe that Stanley is the green-faced criminal they have been searching for. To make the setup stronger, he orders his men to go to Stanley's apartment and collect the stolen bank money. His men follow the order and go to Stanley's place. They find the money and take it, not realizing that Stanley's loyal dog is watching everything from nearby. The dog also sees Stanley tied up inside the criminal's car. It understands that its owner is in danger. After the criminals leave with the money, the dog begins following them. Meanwhile, Stanley remains trapped, tied up and unable to speak because his mouth is covered with tape. The gang leader places the fake green mask into Stanley's pocket. That way, when the police search him, they will think they have found evidence proving he is the masked criminal. Then the gang throws Stanley right into the police's path. The officers immediately catch him and search his pockets. When they find the fake green mask, they believe their suspicion has been confirmed. Stanley is arrested and sent to jail. Later, Tina hears that Stanley has been arrested. Feeling guilty and confused, she goes to visit him in jail. Stanley finally tells her the truth. He admits that he is the man with the green mask, but he explains that the mask found on him was not the real one. The real magical mask is now with her boyfriend. Stanley warns her that the mask changes depending on the heart of the person wearing it. He explains that because he has a good heart, the mask turned him into someone foolish, funny, and mostly harmless. Still, even he had moments where the mask pushed him toward bad choices, like robbing the bank. Then he tells Tina that her boyfriend is different. His heart is already full of greed and cruelty. With the real mask in his hands, he will not just become a prankster or a strange performer. He will become a genuine monster. Stanley warns her that he may rob more than banks. He could take over the whole city, destroy everything, and hurt innocent people unless someone stops him. Tina listens, shaken by his words. She admits that she finally understands the kind of man her boyfriend really is. She realizes he is a criminal and that she made a terrible mistake by being involved with him, but she also says she cannot face him. She is too scared and plans to leave the city instead. Heartbroken, Tina leaves the jail. However, her dangerous boyfriend had already expected that she might turn against him. He knew there was a chance she would betray him after learning the truth, so he sends his men to follow her. Meanwhile, Stanley still has one loyal friend outside, his dog. Earlier, when Stanley was kidnapped, the dog had followed the criminals and seen what happened. Now, while searching for a way to save his owner, the clever dog finally reaches the jail. Inside, the guard is asleep. Moving quietly, the dog sneaks closer and carefully steals the key from the guard's pocket. The dog quietly slips into the jail cell area and reaches Stanley's lock. With the key in its mouth, it manages to help open the cell, giving Stanley a chance to escape. But just as Stanley steps out, a police officer appears and catches him in the act. Stanley has no time to think. Desperate to get out and stop the real danger, he grabs a gun and points it at the officer, forcing him to back away. He does not want to hurt anyone, but he knows Tina is in serious trouble, and there is no other way to leave the jail quickly. Using that moment of fear and confusion, Stanley escapes. Meanwhile, across town, Tina has already been captured by the gang. Her evil boyfriend is now completely consumed by the mask's power. He puts the real mask on again, and instantly his face transforms into a terrifying green version of himself. This time, he is not just powerful. He is cruel, arrogant, and hungry for control. He takes Tina with him and heads toward a gangster bar. This place belongs to a rival crime boss, a man with more power and influence than him. The masked villain cannot tolerate that. Filled with jealousy, he thinks that no one should be above him. If there is a bigger gangster in the city, then he wants to destroy him and take that position for himself. With that mindset, he attacks the rival gangster's bar. The powerful gangster pulls out his gun and starts shooting at him again and again, but the bullets do absolutely nothing. They hit the masked villain, but instead of hurting him, they sink into his body as if he is absorbing them. Then, in a horrifying and ridiculous display of power, he opens his mouth and fires all the bullets back out. The rival gangster is killed instantly. After proving his dominance, the masked villain turns back to Tina. He ties her up and straps a time bomb to her body. Then he mocks her cruelly, saying she wanted to run away, so now she should try running with a bomb attached to her. Tina is trapped, terrified, and running out of time. At that moment, Stanley arrives at the scene. He sees Tina tied up and realizes the situation is even worse than he imagined. Tina quickly understands that she has to play smart. Looking at her former boyfriend, she pretends to speak emotionally. She tells him that she now understands she made a mistake, but before he kills her, she says she wants to see his real face one final time without the mask. In reality, Tina is stalling. She's setting up a chance to get the mask away from him. The villain, full of ego, falls for it. He removes the mask from his face. The second he does, Tina takes her chance and kicks the mask into the air. Stanley's loyal dog leaps up at the perfect moment and catches it before anyone else can. But instead of simply holding it, the dog accidentally puts the mask on. In an instant, it transforms into a wild, funny, monstrous version of itself. Now the little dog becomes a crazy creature full of mask-powered energy. It attacks the villain's men, biting them, ripping their clothes, chasing them around, and turning the whole fight into complete comedy. While the dog handles the gang members, Stanley goes after the villain himself. He punches him again and again, trying to weaken him. Then he calls out to his dog, "Champion, come here." The dog runs to him, and Stanley grabs it, ready to take back the mask. He says that now it is his turn to wear it, but just as Stanley is about to put the mask on, the gang members return and start shooting. One of the bullets strikes the mask and knocks it far away. Stanley immediately runs after it, knowing this is the only thing that can save Tina and stop the villain. He reaches the mask, grabs it, and quickly puts it on. The transformation happens again. Stanley's face turns green, and he becomes the powerful, cartoon-like version of himself once more. Now he is completely bulletproof. The gang fires at him, but the bullets pass through his body without harming him. Stanley even drinks juice casually while being shot, and the juice hilariously sprays out through the bullet holes in his body. Then Stanley rushes toward Tina. Without wasting another second, he tears the bomb away from her body. But instead of throwing it away, he does something insane. He eats the bomb. The timer reaches 0 and the explosion goes off inside him. For a moment, everyone expects disaster, but Stanley simply burps, completely unharmed. The villain attacks him again, but Stanley overpowers him and knocks him toward the water. Using his bizarre mask abilities, Stanley creates an impossible cartoon solution. He magically draws a toilet handle and connects it to a nearby tree, turning the scene into a ridiculous giant flush system. Then he pulls the handle. The villain is swept away and flushed down into the water, disappearing completely. With the danger gone, Stanley reaches Tina and saves her just in time. Soon after, the police arrive. Seeing Stanley in his mask form, they prepare to arrest him once again. But before they can take him away, a man from the crowd steps forward. He reveals that he is the mayor of the city and says he has witnessed everything. He declares that Stanley is innocent and explains that the true criminal was the man who used the mask for evil. One officer points out that the dog is running away with the mask, but the mayor dismisses him and says that this is exactly their problem. They waste time chasing animals while real criminals cause destruction. After hearing this, the police finally release Stanley and focus on the actual criminal threat. The next morning, Stanley, Tina, his dog, and his best friend return to the same place where Stanley first discovered the mask. Stanley holds it and thinks about everything that happened. He admits that the mask allowed him to do unbelievable things, but it also made him forget who he truly was. He says he thought Tina liked the masked version of him more than the real Stanley. Tina gently tells him that this is not true. She says the best thing about him is his real human nature. She does not love the wild Greene version. She loves Stanley just the way he is. Hearing this, Stanley finally understands that he does not need the mask to be special. Tina throws the mask into the ocean, letting it disappear beneath the waves. The camera pulls back as the morning sun rises over the water. The sea glows under the light, the danger is gone, and Stanley's story ends with Tina, his dog, and his friends safe and happy. Okay, first things first, let's talk about who this movie is actually for. On the surface, The Mask looks like a kid's film. I mean, come on, it's got a bright green-faced hero, zany antics, cartoonish expressions, pretty much everything that screams family-friendly fun. But here's the thing. This isn't exactly a movie you'd hand to a 5-year-old. There's slapstick violence, think people getting kicked in the groin, lots of exaggerated chaos, and some jokes that are, let's just say, very much for adults. Yeah, it's the kind of humor that makes you laugh and occasionally cringe at the same time. It's definitely a turn off your brain and enjoy kind of ride. You're not coming here for subtlety or deep storytelling. You're here to watch Jim Carrey go absolutely bananas and let the mask run wild. And honestly, that's where the charm comes from. Even after 24 years, it still hits. Those wild, over-the-top gags land, the chaos feels fresh, and the energy never drops. You just sit back and it's this whirlwind of color, sound, and absurdity. But fair warning, the movie has a darker streak you might not notice if you're watching it as a kid. There's a gangster subplot, some threats, a few tense moments. It's not all rainbows and slapstick. So yeah, it's quirky, it's loud, it's messy, and that's the point. It's a comedy that knows it's ridiculous and fully leans into it, and that's why it works even today. In short, if you want a brainy, subtle, safe for all ages kind of movie, skip it. But if you're down for chaos, laughs, and just a really fun, silly 90s ride, The Mask is pure gold. Now, let's talk about the story itself. So we've got Stanley Ipkiss, your classic shy, awkward bank clerk. Nice guy, but a total pushover. Everyone walks all over him. Life's kind of boring, predictable, and honestly, a little sad. And then bam, he stumbles across this mysterious ancient mask. And here's where the magic kicks in. Put it on and Stanley becomes the mask. A full-on, cartoonish, green-faced, zany alter ego. Suddenly, he's fast, invincible, charming, completely unhinged, the kind of character you can't take your eyes off. The movie does a brilliant job showing the transformation, and it's not just physical. It's Stanley stepping into the person he's always wanted to be, confident, outrageous, unstoppable. From there, the plot kicks into gear. Stanley's got gangsters to deal with, a love interest to woo, hello, Tina Carlisle, and a city full of chaos to navigate. The mask persona allows him to pull off stunts, dance like a maniac in nightclubs, and pretty much turn every scene into a whirlwind of comedy and spectacle. It's simple, really. There's no mind-bending complexity here. But that's the beauty of it. The story gives Carrey a playground to unleash his energy while keeping you invested in Stanley's journey. You want him to succeed, to get the girl, and most importantly, to have fun along the way. And because it's based on a comic book, the rules of reality are flexible, to say the least. In short, the premise is pure 90s comedy gold. An underdog finds power, chaos ensues, and we get to sit back and enjoy one of the most visually and physically entertaining performances ever put on screen. It's straightforward, but it works perfectly for the kind of manic, absurd humor the movie thrives on. All right, now let's dig a little deeper, because while The Mask is wild, slapstick, and absolutely ridiculous, there's actually a surprising layer to it. That mask isn't just some silly green prop, it's Stanley's inner self, all the stuff he keeps bottled up finally getting a voice. Confidence, charm, anger, mischief, and even a little romantic flair. It's all unleashed when he puts it on. Think about it, shy, meek Stanley suddenly turns into this larger-than-life personality who does everything he's secretly wanted to. He's standing up to bullies, he's daring, he's outrageous. It's basically a live-action cartoon, but it's also a metaphor for what happens when you finally let yourself be yourself. And I don't just mean fun yourself. I mean your real, raw, uninhibited self, flaws, desires, and all. The movie even hints at that classic Jekyll and Hyde vibe. There's a cost to embracing that freedom. The mask isn't always good or safe, but it forces Stanley to confront his limitations, his insecurities, and his dreams. And by the end, you realize the mask isn't what makes him special. It's just a catalyst. The real magic is inside Stanley all along. So yeah, on the surface, it's chaos, jokes, and crazy stunts. But underneath, it's kind of brilliant. A goofy, neon green way to explore identity, self-expression, and the little secret desires we all have. And it works perfectly because Carrey sells both sides, the timid bank clerk and the unstoppable mask, so you can feel the contrast, the transformation, and honestly, it's kind of mesmerizing. It's funny, it's crazy, but there's also a heart to it. Who knew a 90s slapstick comedy could sneak in a lesson about embracing your true self without ever feeling preachy? That's the genius of this film. Now, honestly, this movie lives or dies on Jim Carrey, and I don't mean that in the casual, he's the lead actor way. I mean, without him, The Mask probably collapses into a weird effects comedy with a thin plot and a lot of noise. With him, it becomes something completely alive. What Carrey does here is kind of ridiculous when you actually stop and watch it closely. As Stanley Ipkiss, he's not just playing awkward guy. He gives Stanley this nervous, soft little energy, like a man who apologizes before he even does anything wrong. His shoulders are slightly folded in, his smile is unsure, his voice has that desperate politeness to it. You believe this guy gets pushed around. You believe he goes home, talks to his dog, and just swallows every frustration because he doesn't know what else to do with it. And then the mask goes on. Suddenly Carrey becomes pure movement. His face stretches, his eyes pop, his voice jumps all over the place, his body moves like it has no bones. But the crazy part is, even with all the CGI and makeup, it never feels like the effects are doing all the work. Carrey himself is the special effect. The green face just gives him permission to go further. That's why the role fits him so perfectly. The mask is basically every Jim Carrey impulse turned up to maximum volume. The voices, the impressions, the elastic facial expressions, the sudden dances, the cartoon confidence, the complete lack of shame. But it works because Stanley is there underneath it. There's a real contrast. He's not just doing random funny faces for 90 minutes. He's playing a man who finally gets to release everything he's been holding back. And sure, for some people, Carrey's style can be too much. I get that. He's loud, he's brash, he's not exactly subtle here. This is not quiet comedy. This is comedy that kicks the door open, spins into the room, and starts dancing before you even know what's happening. But in The Mask, that over-the-top energy actually belongs to the movie. The whole world is built to handle him. What's easy to forget is how much control there is behind the madness. The timing is sharp. The body language is precise. Even when he's acting completely unhinged, you can feel the rhythm. The Cuban Pete sequence, the nightclub scenes, the police interactions, he's not just being chaotic. He's performing like a live-action cartoon character and somehow making it feel effortless. For me, this is one of Carrey's purest comedy performances. Maybe not his deepest, maybe not his most mature, but one of the most perfectly matched to his talent. The movie understands what he can do, then builds an entire playground around it. And that's the magic. The Mask doesn't try to restrain Jim Carrey, it lets him run wild. And because of that, we get a performance that still feels electric decades later. Jim Carrey's 1994 run is one of those Hollywood moments that almost sounds made up when you say it out loud. In the same year, he had Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber. 3 movies, 3 completely different flavors of chaos, and somehow all of them hit. That doesn't happen often. Most actors spend years trying to build that kind of momentum. Carrey basically exploded onto the screen in 1 calendar year and changed the whole shape of mainstream comedy. But The Mask is important because it did something slightly different for him. Ace Ventura showed people the madness. Dumb and Dumber leaned into the stupidity in the best possible way, but The Mask gave his energy a fantasy framework. It made his cartoonish style feel not just acceptable, but logical. Suddenly, all those wild faces, sudden voices, elastic movements, and manic outbursts had a reason to exist inside the story. That's why this film feels like such a perfect career vehicle. It didn't try to make Jim Carrey normal. It didn't ask him to calm down. It basically said, what if we built an entire movie around the fact that this guy already moves like a cartoon character? And honestly, that was the right call. You can feel the shift while watching it. This isn't just a funny actor getting a good role. This is a performer finding the exact screen language that matches him. The green face, the zoot suit, the rubbery effects, the old cartoon references, it all turns Carrey into this larger-than-life comedy figure. Not just a comedian, a full movie star. And after The Mask, there was no question anymore. Jim Carrey wasn't just the weird guy from comedy sketches or the loud guy from Ace Ventura. He was bankable. He was recognizable. He had a style audiences could spot instantly. That face, that energy, that somebody stop me confidence, it became part of the 90s. What's interesting, though, is that the movie also gave him room to be softer. Stanley Ipkiss isn't just a joke machine. He's lonely, insecure, kind of sweet, and very easy to root for. That mattered. It hinted that Carrey could do more than just go wild. He could make the audience care before the madness even started, so when people talk about The Mask as one of his defining roles, it makes sense. This wasn't just another hit comedy. It was the film that proved his style could carry a big, effects-heavy, mainstream movie. It helped turn Jim Carrey from a rising comic actor into one of the biggest comedy stars of the decade. And whether you love his style or find it exhausting, you can't really deny the impact. In 1994, Jim Carrey didn't just have a good year. He became a whole era of comedy by himself. And then there's Cameron Diaz as Tina Carlisle, which is still one of the most memorable first big-screen appearance moments from the 90s. The movie knows exactly how to introduce her. That entrance at the bank, walking in out of the rain, dressed like she just stepped out of a Tex Avery fever dream, it's not subtle, not even a little bit, but it works because the whole film is already operating in this exaggerated cartoon universe. Tina isn't introduced like a normal person. She's introduced like an event. And for a debut performance, Diaz has a surprising amount of ease on screen. She could have easily been swallowed by Jim Carrey's energy, because let's be honest, sharing scenes with him in this movie is like standing next to a firework display. But she holds her own. She has this calm, playful confidence that balances him out. Carrey is bouncing off the walls, and Diaz gives the movie a kind of old Hollywood glamour, something softer and more controlled. Now, is Tina the most deeply written character? No, not really. The script mostly frames her as the dream girl, the nightclub singer, the gangster's girlfriend, the woman Stanley is instantly dazzled by. There's not a huge amount of complexity on the page, but Diaz brings charm to it. She makes Tina feel warmer than the role probably had to be. That's important, because Tina could have easily just been a fantasy figure. And yeah, in some ways she is. The movie absolutely presents her through that 90s male gaze lens, but Diaz gives her enough personality that she doesn't completely disappear into the styling. There's a sweetness there, a little vulnerability, and a sense that Tina is also stuck in a life she doesn't fully want. Her chemistry with Carrey helps a lot too. The Coco Bongo scenes are the obvious highlight, especially the dance sequence, where the movie suddenly becomes part cartoon, part musical, part romantic fantasy. It's silly, flashy, and completely unreal, but somehow, their connection gives it a little spark beyond the spectacle, and that's probably why this role launched her so quickly. You watch The Mask, and even if Tina isn't given the richest material, Diaz clearly has screen presence. She has that thing actors either have or don't. The camera likes her. The audience remembers her. And in a movie this loud, that's not easy. So yes, The Mask is mostly Jim Carrey's show. No argument there. But Cameron Diaz makes a real impression. she brings glamour, warmth, and charisma to a role that could have been forgettable in the wrong hands. Instead, Tina Carlo became one of the film's signature pieces and one of the most iconic debuts of that decade. Okay, now let's talk about the romance. Honestly, it's not exactly Shakespeare. The story throws Stanley and Tina together fast, and some of the motivation feels, let's say, convenient. You don't really get a slow burn here. One moment Stanley's a shy, bumbling banker, the next he's dazzling her at a nightclub like it's no big deal. The film doesn't dwell on it, and that's kind of the point. But here's the thing, it still works. There's an energy between Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz that makes you root for them, even when the script is rushing through the romance. The Coco Bongo dance scene, pure magic. Flashy, wild, ridiculous, and yet you feel the chemistry. It's that push and pull of fun chaos and flirtation that keeps you watching. Even in a movie that's basically a live-action cartoon, these moments give the story a little heart, and Diaz really helps sell it. She's not just a prop for Carrey's antics. She matches his energy in the scenes that matter and brings a bit of charm and warmth to a story that otherwise could have been all gags and slapstick. You can see why audiences were hooked, and honestly, it gave her career a big jumpstart. So yeah, the romance is quick, maybe a little surface level, but in context, it fits. It's fun, it's flirty, and it adds a reason to care about Stanley beyond just watching him go full cartoon chaos. And that's enough for a comedy like this, because if you can get invested in who he's trying to impress while he's dancing across the screen in a zoot suit and popping his eyes out, you're in for a good time. Now, while Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz obviously steal the show, the supporting cast deserves a shout-out because they really help ground the chaos. Take Peter Riegert as Lieutenant Kellaway. The poor guy is trying so hard to maintain some semblance of order, but he's constantly being outsmarted by a green-faced, zany superhero. Watching him fumble and get frustrated is comedy gold. He's basically the straight man to Carrey's unhinged antics, and it works perfectly. Then there's Peter Greene as Dorian Tyrell. He's the gangster threatening Edge City, and while his character isn't deeply layered, he's kind of bad just because. Greene still brings this sneering, menacing energy that makes the stakes feel real. It's a nice contrast to all the slapstick, giving the film a little bite amid the laughs. And you've got Richard Jenny and Amy Yasbeck popping in for smaller roles that still add personality. Jenny, as one of the side characters, brings a dry, sardonic humor that plays well off Carrey's over-the-top style. And Yasbeck, even in her limited screen time, adds some charm and comic timing. Oh, and we cannot forget Milo, the dog. Honestly, that little terrier is a scene stealer. From perfectly timed reactions to being part of the mask's antics, Milo brings an unexpected but very welcome comedic touch. It's rare to see an animal contribute so consistently to the humor without feeling forced. The supporting cast might not be the reason most people remember the mask, but they're absolutely crucial. They help create the world Stanley has to navigate, give Carrey someone to play off of, and add texture to all the insanity. Without them, the film might have just been a one-man circus, but with them, it feels like a fully realized, chaotic, cartoonish city coming to life. Now, the gangster plot in The Mask is probably one of the weaker parts of the movie, but it's also weirdly necessary. Dorian Tyrell is not exactly a complicated villain. He's not the kind of antagonist where you sit there thinking, wow, what a layered psychological portrait. No, he's a gangster. He wants power. He wants the club. He wants the money. Eventually, he wants the mask. That's pretty much the package. And honestly, for this kind of movie, that's enough, because The Mask isn't really trying to give us a deep crime drama. The gangster storyline is there to create pressure around Stanley. It gives The Mask something to crash into. Without Dorian and his goons, Stanley would just be running around Edge City doing impressions, annoying mechanics, and dancing in nightclubs. Fun, sure, but after a while, you need some kind of threat to push the story forward. Peter Greene plays Dorian with that cold, sneering energy that makes him feel dangerous enough, even if the writing doesn't give him a whole lot of depth. He has that 90s movie villain look too, sharp suits, dead eyes, always standing like he's seconds away from doing something violent. He fits the world of the film, especially because The Mask is already borrowing from old gangster movies. The smoky nightclub, the mobster girlfriend, the criminal boss trying to take over the city, it's all very familiar, but the movie knows that. It's playing with those cliches more than reinventing them. The tricky part is that the gangster violence sometimes feels darker than the rest of the film. You'll have this bright, rubber-faced cartoon chaos 1 minute, and then suddenly the movie remembers there are criminals with guns and actual threats. It can be a slightly odd mix, not enough to ruin the fun, but you do feel the tonal jump here and there. Still, Dorian becomes more interesting once the mask enters his hands. That's when the movie makes its point pretty clearly. The mask doesn't turn everyone into the same thing. It brings out what's already inside. With Stanley, it unleashes confidence, mischief, romance, and showmanship. With Dorian, it brings out something uglier, more violent, more monstrous. So even if the villain plot is simple, it does serve the bigger idea of the movie. The mask is not automatically heroic. It's power without a filter. And when the wrong person wears it, the funhouse energy suddenly becomes threatening. Could the gangster side have been stronger? Definitely. The romance is rushed, the villain is basic, and some of the crime movie material feels like it's only there because the plot needs a final boss. But in a film this fast and cartoonish, Dorian works as a blunt force obstacle. He gives Stanley something to overcome, gives Tina a reason to be trapped in that world, and gives the final act a little danger beneath all the jokes. So no, the gangster plot isn't the reason people keep coming back to The Mask. Nobody is revisiting this movie for the criminal underworld of Edge City. But it gives the comedy a frame, it gives The Mask a target, and it lets the film play around with old-school mobster movie flavor without ever taking itself too seriously. Now let's give credit where credit's due. Chuck Russell's direction in The Mask is surprisingly sharp, especially when you consider he was mostly known for horror and action before this. I mean, we're talking about the guy who did A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and The Blob, not exactly slapstick comedy material, and yet somehow he nails it here. Russell understands the tone the movie needs. He doesn't try to rein in Jim Carrey's chaos. Instead, he frames it. The camera moves with Carrey, letting his manic energy dominate the screen without ever feeling sloppy. The film has this insane rhythm. 1 minute we're in a nightclub with dance numbers, the next we're dodging bullets in a bank heist gone wrong. Somehow, it all flows. He also knows when to inject a little tension. Thanks to his horror background, even amidst all the cartoonish madness, the gangster sequences carry weight. Dorian Tyrell feels threatening because Russell gives him space to breathe, and the editing lets you sense the danger without slowing the comedy down. It's a delicate balance, and it works better than you'd expect. And then there's the visual comedy. Russell fully embraces the Tex Avery, Looney Tunes-inspired aesthetic. He positions the shots to maximize Carrey's expressions, the rubbery CGI antics, and the physical gags. It's not just chaos for chaos' sake. He's choreographing every move so the audience knows where to look, when to laugh, and how far the absurdity can go without tipping over. The nightclub scenes, the Coco Bongo numbers, the chase sequences, they all feel cinematic, not just a series of set pieces. He's taking slapstick, fantasy, action, and a bit of romance, and somehow molding them into a single, cohesive, energetic movie. Honestly, for a director who wasn't primarily known for comedy, Russell deserves a lot of credit here. He builds a world where the rules are flexible. Carrey can go completely off the rails, and yet the movie still feels like a story with stakes, humor, and heart. It's no small feat. In the end, Russell's direction is the glue that holds the madness together. Without him, The Mask might have just been a visual experiment or a sketch-length comedy stretched to feature length. With him, it's a riotous, fully realized live-action cartoon that still feels fun and precise more than 2 decades later. All right, let's be honest. The script in The Mask isn't going to win any Oscars for depth. It's pretty thin and some parts feel like they're only there to get to the next gag. The romance, rushed. The villain, simple, bad just to be bad. The plot, fairly straightforward. Stanley finds a mask, chaos ensues, he wins the girl, stops the bad guy. That's basically it. But here's the thing, the simplicity actually works in its favor. This is a movie that wants to be a high-energy cartoon in live action, and a complicated, layered screenplay would have weighed it down. The story gives Carrey a playground. It's flexible, elastic, and it allows the comedy to breathe. You don't need a million subplots when your main character can literally stretch his face out of proportion or spin around like a tornado. That said, you do notice the gaps. The gangster subplot can feel like it was tacked on, and some of the motivations, especially in the romance, aren't exactly believable. You're supposed to just accept that Stanley wins Tina over in record time. But honestly, that's kind of the point. The film asks you to suspend disbelief. The narrative is more a vehicle than a blueprint, and yet, Mike Werb's screenplay does have cleverness buried in it. There's a rhythm to the jokes, a timing that makes the absurdity land, and an understanding of cartoon logic. It even throws in nods to old gangster films and Tex Avery cartoons, which keeps it feeling playful rather than random. There's a structure behind the chaos, even if it's loose. So yes, the script has weaknesses. It's thin, some story beats don't make perfect sense, but in a movie like this, that's okay. It's not pretending to be anything other than what it is. A wild, slapstick comedy powered by Jim Carrey and a magical green mask. And because the story gives the film just enough bones to hang all that chaos on, it works far better than you might expect. In short, the script isn't perfect, but it doesn't need to be. It's the trampoline for the madness, and without it, the rest of the film wouldn't land nearly as hard. The comedy in The Mask is not subtle, not even pretending to be. This is loud, rubber-faced, full-body comedy. It's the kind of humor where a man doesn't just react to something shocking. His eyes practically launch out of his skull, his jaw drops like a trapdoor, and the whole scene turns into a cartoon explosion. And honestly, that's the language of the movie. It's not trying to give you dry wit in a quiet room. It's trying to grab you by the collar and drag you into a Looney Tunes nightmare with jazz music playing in the background. Most of the jokes are built around excess. Big reactions, big movements, big voices, big punchlines. The Mask doesn't enter a room, he invades it. He flirts too hard, dances too hard, talks too fast, and turns every normal situation into a stage performance. A police standoff becomes a musical number. A nightclub scene becomes a cartoon fantasy. Even revenge against a couple of mechanics becomes this ridiculous, over-the-top gag that feels like it came straight out of an old animated short. And that's why the comedy works when it works. The movie understands that Stanley is repressed. He's been swallowing frustration for years, so when the Mask takes over, the humor isn't just random noise. It's all the stuff he could never say or do suddenly bursting out in the most exaggerated way possible. The anger, the confidence, the lust, the showmanship, the childish revenge, it all becomes comedy. Now, does every joke land? No. Some of it is very 90s, some of it is childish, some of it is the kind of joke where you either laugh immediately or just sit there thinking, okay, that was a lot. And for viewers who don't like Jim Carrey's style, this movie can probably feel exhausting. He's not giving you little chuckles, he's throwing the whole comedy toolbox at the screen, but there's also real timing here. The catchphrases, the sudden impressions, the physical gags, the way he snaps from suave to insane in half a second, it's not as easy as it looks. Carrey makes the chaos feel controlled. He knows when to stretch a moment, when to cut it short, when to let the audience catch up, and when to just go completely off the rails. What I like is that the movie doesn't apologize for being silly. It fully commits. It wants to be stupid but not lazy. There's a difference. The best scenes have rhythm, style, and a real old-school showbiz energy. You can feel the influence of classic cartoons, gangster parodies, musical comedy, and slapstick all crashing into each other. So yeah, The Mask is ridiculous. It's noisy. It's sometimes immature. But it's also genuinely funny because it has personality. The comedy has shape. It has momentum. And when it hits, it really hits. It's the kind of movie where you don't laugh because it's clever in a polished, sophisticated way. You laugh because the whole thing is so confidently unhinged that resisting it almost feels pointless. One of the things that makes The Mask feel so special, and honestly, so alive, is how it leans into the cartoon world. I mean, this movie is basically a Looney Tunes short stretched into a full-length feature, and it wears that influence proudly. Tex Avery's fingerprints are all over it. The wild, physics-defying gags, the exaggerated reactions, the zany timing, it's like watching Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck come to life in the real world. You can see it in everything. The nightclub dance sequences, the Coco Bongo show, the Cuban Pete routine, they're not just set pieces, they're little mini-cartoon episodes. The way Carrey moves, stretches, and warps his body is straight out of a 1940s animation, but done with a human actor. And that's where it gets so impressive. It could have felt absurd or awkward, but the film sells it. The exaggeration feels natural because everyone, from Carrey to Diaz to the extras, plays it straight enough to sell the silliness. Even the smaller gags lean on this. Police officers dancing involuntarily, objects bending, walls stretching, eyes popping out of sockets, it's classic Avery. And unlike some live-action attempts at cartoon humor, the movie doesn't just throw in random gags. Every crazy bit comes from the character, the situation, or the mask itself. It's anarchic, yes, but it has logic inside the chaos. And it's not just homage for the sake of it. By channeling those old-school cartoons, the movie creates a world where Carrey's energy makes sense. It's exaggerated, it's over the top, and it's ridiculous, but in the context of a live-action cartoon, it works. The humor lands, the timing pops, and the audience willingly goes along for the ride because the rules of reality are flexible. So, if you love the golden age of cartoons, you'll notice the little nods everywhere. Fast-paced chase sequences, characters bouncing off walls, breaking the fourth wall, outrageous expressions. It's all there, and it's a huge part of why the movie still feels so fun, so kinetic, and so unmistakably 90s. The Mask doesn't just borrow from Tex Avery, it lives inside it, and that's what gives the film its signature, cartoonish heartbeat. The special effects in The Mask are a huge part of why the movie still has that weird, electric charm. You have to remember, this was 1994. CGI was not something every other movie was throwing around like confetti yet. So when Stanley puts on the mask and suddenly his eyes are popping out, His jaw is dropping to the floor. His body is moving like a rubber band. It really did feel like something new. Not just look at this cool computer effect, but something that actually matched the personality of the film. And that's the key. The effects are not trying to look realistic. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to look like a cartoon has crashed into a real city and nobody knows how to stop it. That's why even when certain shots feel a little dated now, they still work. The artificial quality almost helps. It gives the movie that comic book Saturday morning cartoon madness that it's clearly going for. The makeup does a lot too. That green face could have looked ridiculous in the wrong way, but on Jim Carrey, it becomes part of the performance. You can still see his expressions through it. His eyebrows, his mouth, his grin, that wild stare, it all comes through. The makeup doesn't hide Carrey, it amplifies him. Visually, the whole movie has this bright, exaggerated style. Edge City feels like a place that belongs halfway between a gangster movie and an old cartoon. The nightclub scenes are glossy and colorful. The streets have that slightly unreal comic book feeling. Even the costumes help sell it, especially that yellow zoot suit, which should look completely insane, and it does, but somehow it also becomes iconic. What I like is that the film doesn't use effects just to show off. Most of the visual tricks are tied to jokes. The stretching, the spinning, the eye-popping, the impossible movement, it's all part of the comedy rhythm. The CGI is basically another performer in the scene, bouncing off Carrey's physical timing. And honestly, that's why the movie was so impressive for its time. It wasn't just about having advanced effects. It was about using them with personality. The visuals had energy. They had humor. They understood the cartoon language the movie was speaking. So yeah, some effects may not look as polished as modern blockbuster CGI, but I'd argue The Mask still has more visual identity than a lot of newer films. It has a look you remember. It has images that stick in your head. And for a comedy this loud and ridiculous, that matters. The effects, the makeup, the colors, the costumes, everything works together to turn Jim Carrey into a living cartoon. And once that transformation happens, the movie becomes exactly what it wants to be. Bright, strange, rubbery, chaotic, and completely unforgettable. The music in The Mask doesn't just sit in the background. It practically grabs the movie by the shoulders and pushes it onto the dance floor. And that's important, because this film has a very specific rhythm. It's not only a comedy. It moves like a cartoon, but it also swings like an old nightclub show. The jazz, the big band energy, the sharp sound cues, the exaggerated effects, everything is tuned to make the movie feel bigger, faster, and more theatrical than real life. The Coco Bongo scenes are the obvious standout. That club feels like the center of the movie's whole personality. It's glamorous, smoky, colorful, a little dangerous, and completely unreal. When Tina performs, the film suddenly slows down just enough to let the audience feel the old-school Hollywood charm. Then the mask enters, and the whole place turns into a live-action cartoon stage. And that dance sequence with Stanley and Tina, still one of the film's signature moments. It's silly, yes, but it has real style. The music makes the scene feel like a fantasy, like Stanley isn't just impressing Tina, he's stepping into the version of himself he always wished he could be. Confident, smooth, impossible to ignore. Then you have Cuban Pete, which is pure madness in the best way. A police confrontation somehow becomes a full musical number, and the movie doesn't even blink. That's the magic of The Mask. It can take a tense scene, throw rhythm and absurdity into it, and suddenly everyone is dancing. It shouldn't work, but it does, because by that point the film has already trained you to accept cartoon logic. The sound design is just as important. Every pop, stretch, spin, whoosh, and exaggerated hit adds to the comedy. The mask doesn't move like a normal person, so he doesn't sound like one either. His whole body feels like an animated instrument. The sound effects give his movements punch, and they make the gags land harder. What I really like is how the music and sound keep the pacing alive. The movie never feels flat because there's always some kind of sonic energy pushing it forward. A drum hit, a brass stab, a cartoon noise, a sudden musical flourish. It all feeds into that restless, hyperactive tone. So when people remember The Mask, they don't just remember the green face or the yellow suit. They remember the sound of it, the swing music, the club numbers, the sudden bursts of chaos. The way every gag seems to arrive with its own little musical punchline. It's loud, playful, theatrical, and completely committed. And without that musical energy, The Mask would not feel nearly as alive. One of the things that really makes The Mask work, beyond the jokes, the crazy stunts, and Carrey's elastic face, is how fast and tight it moves. This movie has energy coming out of every frame. From the opening shot to the final gag, it never really lets up. The editing plays a huge part in that. Cuts are snappy. Reactions land perfectly. Carrey's manic movements don't feel overwhelming because the camera follows him in just the right way. And when there's a gag or a stunt, the timing is spot on. You never feel lost, even when the action and the cartoon chaos are at full tilt. The pacing isn't just fast for the sake of being fast, it helps the comedy land. There's no waiting around for a joke to hit, everything comes at you in quick bursts. The nightclub scene, the chase sequences, even the bank heist, it's all relentless fun, and the editing keeps you laughing rather than exhausted. And somehow, even with all this manic energy, the movie never drags. You feel like it's always moving, but never in a way that's tiring. There's a rhythm to the madness. The comedy, the action, the music, the effects, they all feed off each other. Everything builds on the previous gag, and it keeps you engaged for the full 97 or so minutes. Basically, the film has a pulse. It's alive. It doesn't stumble. Even when the plot takes a backseat to the spectacle, the energy is enough to carry you along. And that's a big part of why it's still rewatchable decades later. You can pause the brain and just ride the chaos, and it still feels exhilarating. So yeah, The Mask isn't just funny because of Carrey or the gags. It's funny because it never stops moving. The editing, the pacing, the sheer kinetic energy of it all makes this movie feel like a cartoon that's running through a live-action world, and it's one of the reasons it's so unforgettable. One of the things that makes The Mask so unique, and honestly a little hard to categorize, is the way it blends genres like it's nobody's business. It's a superhero movie, a slapstick comedy, a romantic comedy, a gangster flick, and a live-action cartoon all rolled into one. And somehow it works. Somehow it doesn't feel like a mess. You've got the superhero angle, of course. Stanley puts on the mask, gets powers, and takes on criminals, but it's not your traditional hero story. There's no solemn morality, no brooding origin story. He's just having fun while stopping bad guys, and that makes the superhero side feel light and playful. Then there's the comedy, pure, unfiltered Jim Carrey chaos. Physical gags, visual jokes, absurd dialogue, and cartoon physics collide with the superhero antics, and it's nonstop fun. At the same time, the film leans into romantic comedy when Stanley tries to woo Tina, giving those chaotic moments a little emotional grounding. And let's not forget the gangster subplot. Dorian Tyrell and his crew add stakes, tension, and just enough menace to keep the story from being pure silliness. That's what helps balance the chaos. Without some sense of danger, the cartoon antics might feel empty. Finally, the whole thing is wrapped in a cartoonish, Tex Avery-inspired visual style. So even though it borrows from a dozen genres, the live-action cartoon aesthetic ties it all together. Everything comedy, romance, action, and superhero theatrics fits within this exaggerated, kinetic universe. It's a wild mix, no doubt, and that's what makes it so memorable. Most movies stick to one genre. The Mask dances across five, and it never feels confused. It's loud, it's ridiculous, it's heartfelt at times, and it's pure 90s cinematic chaos. By embracing the mashup instead of trying to force itself into a single box, it becomes something really special, a movie that feels bigger than the sum of its parts. Now here's something you might not expect when you watch The Mask. Beneath all the cartoon chaos and wild gags, there's a darker streak running through the movie. I mean, on the surface, it's bright, slapstick, and ridiculous, but take a closer look, and you'll notice there's some real tension and even a little menace tucked in there. Stanley's life before The Mask isn't exactly cheerful. He's lonely, timid, and constantly pushed around by everyone around him. That sense of frustration, insecurity, and even sadness is the emotional fuel behind The Mask's antics. When he finally puts it on, it's not just comedy, it's a release of all that pent-up stuff. And that duality, that Jekyll and Hyde vibe, gives the movie an unexpected depth. Then you've got the gangster subplot. Dorian and his crew aren't just cartoonish villains, they're actually dangerous. Guns, threats, real stakes. They contrast sharply with the manic comedy and remind you that this world, while exaggerated, has consequences. The movie flirts with this darkness without ever letting it take over, which keeps the comedy feeling sharp and exciting rather than hollow. Even The Mask itself carries a little moral ambiguity. It gives Stanley immense power, but it also magnifies desires that aren't entirely good. He can fight crime, woo Tina, or just wreak havoc on anyone who annoys him. The film hints that absolute freedom isn't without risk, and that adds an interesting layer beneath all the jokes. So while most people remember The Mask for the green face, the zoot suit, and Carrey bouncing off walls, part of what makes it stick is that shadow lurking under all that chaos. The movie has heart, tension, and just enough darkness to give the comedy real weight. It's not grim, but it's not all cotton candy either, and that balance is part of why it still works, even decades later. One of the coolest things about The Mask is how it sits at the crossroads of so many comedy traditions. You can see echoes of the silent film greats, Chaplin, Keaton, even Harpo Marx, in Carrey's physicality as Stanley. The awkward movements, the timing, the tiny gestures before everything explodes into chaos, They feel straight out of classic comedy, just dialed way up for the 90s. Then there's the animated influence. Tex Avery, Looney Tunes, and even hints of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. All of it bleeds into the live-action scenes. The exaggerated expressions, the impossibly fast movements, the cartoon physics. This isn't just homage, it's a full-on translation of that style into live action. Carrey doesn't just imitate cartoons, he embodies them. And if you think about Carrey's 90s comedy era, The Mask fits perfectly alongside Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber. Those films were all about letting him run wild, but The Mask added a fantasy framework that gave his energy context. He wasn't just being crazy for the sake of it. He was channeling it through the mask, through this almost superhero-ish persona, which elevated the comedy to a whole new level. Even in terms of superhero films, it's kind of remarkable. Before all the modern Marvel and DC universes, here's a superhero movie that's absurd, anarchic, and slapstick. It pokes fun at the genre while being part of it. Stanley isn't a brooding dark hero. He's a manic, green-faced whirlwind who uses powers to pull off stunts, fight crime, and get the girl. It's playful, it's chaotic, and it's totally unlike most other superhero films of its time. So when you watch The Mask, you're really seeing this mashup of comedy history and innovation. Silent film slapstick, animated cartoon logic, early 90s Jim Carrey energy, and a superhero framework all crash together, and it works. It's loud, it's weird, it's fun, and it's a love letter to everything from Golden Age cartoons to contemporary comedy, all rolled into one zany, unforgettable movie. So why does The Mask still feel so alive even all these years later? Honestly, part of it is nostalgia, sure, but it's more than that. This movie captured a moment in the 90s, a kind of frenetic energy, a crazy mix of comedy, music, and visual spectacle that you just don't see as often anymore. And the best part, it still works. Watch it now and the jokes land. The gags are quick, Carrey's manic energy still feels unstoppable, and the visual style, bright, elastic, cartoonish, holds up better than you might expect. The nightclub numbers, the chase scenes, even little moments like Milo the dog popping in for a gag, they still make you grin. That's the kind of rewatch value that doesn't fade just because technology moves on or trends change. Culturally, this film mattered. It wasn't just another comedy. It catapulted Jim Carrey to a new level of stardom, introduced Cameron Diaz in a career-defining role, and showed Hollywood that you could successfully mash together slapstick, superhero tropes, and cartoon chaos in a live-action world. For a lot of people growing up in the 90s, it was their first exposure to that kind of energy on screen, and it left an impression that stuck. And the best part, it doesn't feel trapped in the 90s. The humor, the chaos, the sheer creativity, it's universal. Kids, teens, adults, even new viewers today can watch it and get sucked in. You can quote Smockin' or watch the Cuban Pete scene and still feel that thrill, even if you weren't there the first time around. Basically, The Mask is one of those rare movies that's both a time capsule and timeless. It captures a particular era of filmmaking and comedy, but it's still fun, still funny, and still bold. You can watch it again and again and it won't feel stale. And that's why, decades later, people still talk about it, laugh at it, and remember it as one of the defining comedies of the 90s. It's chaotic, it's loud, it's ridiculous. But it's also endlessly entertaining, and somehow, impossibly, it never loses its spark. Now, let's talk about the legacy of The Mask, and why, honestly, it works so well as a one-shot movie. First off, it spawned a sequel, Son of the Mask, which, if we're being honest, nobody really remembers fondly. It didn't have Carrey, it didn't have Diaz, and the magic that made the first movie so wild and charming just wasn't there. The fact that the original stands alone actually works in its favor. You don't need a follow-up to explain anything. It's complete, chaotic, and satisfying all on its own. The legacy of the film is bigger than just box office numbers, though. It cemented Jim Carrey as a 90s comedy icon. It introduced Cameron Diaz, and it proved that a live-action cartoon could not only exist but thrive. People still reference it, quote it, and revisit it decades later. Smockin' isn't just a catchphrase, it's part of pop culture now, and the one-shot appeal is part of what keeps it timeless. You don't need to know anything about the sequel, the TV series, or any of the imitators that followed. The movie delivers a complete, satisfying ride: introduction, chaos, romance, stakes, and resolution. It hits all the beats and then ends with a flourish, leaving you grinning without needing another installment to tie up loose ends. In a way, that's rare for a 90s blockbuster. So many films back then felt like they were setting up for a franchise. The Mask doesn't. It embraces its own absurdity and lets the story breathe on its own. And maybe that's why it's still rewatchable, still quoted, and still beloved. The legacy, the charm, the pure insanity, it all works because the film is confident enough to be a complete package. It's chaotic, funny, ridiculous, and somehow smart in its own way. And that's why The Mask doesn't just survive as a 90s movie, it thrives, decades later, as a comedy classic that knows exactly what it wants to be. Now, one thing that's actually worth mentioning with The Mask is how well it plays on home media. This is the kind of movie that benefits from a good release. The colors, the makeup, the nightclub lighting, the cartoon effects, the zoot suit, the green face, all of that visual madness looks better when the transfer is clean. And on newer formats, especially 4000, you can really appreciate how much craft went into making this thing feel like a live-action cartoon instead of just a random effects showcase. What's funny is the movie is so loud and fast that when you first watch it, you're mostly just riding the energy. You're laughing at Carrey, watching Diaz light up the screen, waiting for the next gag. But when you revisit it on DVD, Blu-ray, or 4000, you start noticing the smaller stuff, the makeup detail, the way the effects are layered into Carrey's performance, the costumes, the lighting inside Coco Bongo. Even the sound design feels more playful when you're paying attention, and the extras help with that too. Commentary tracks, behind-the-scenes material, deleted scenes, little production details, those things give you a better sense of how carefully the chaos was built. Because The Mask can look effortless in the moment, like everyone just showed up and let Jim Carrey go insane for an hour and a half. But obviously, that's not how a movie like this works. The timing has to be precise. The effects have to match the performance. The musical numbers have to be choreographed. The comedy has to land in the edit. Deleted scenes are especially interesting with a film like this because you can see what kind of material didn't make the final cut. Sometimes it's a pacing decision, sometimes it's tone, sometimes the movie just knows, okay, we've had enough chaos here, move on, and that's part of why the final version works as well as it does. So for fans, the home media releases aren't just a way to rewatch the movie, they're a way to appreciate the machinery behind the madness. You get to see how much planning went into something that feels completely unplanned. And honestly, that makes revisiting The Mask even more fun. It's already a great couch movie, easy to throw on, easy to enjoy, still funny after all these years. But with a good presentation and some solid extras, it becomes more than nostalgia. You're reminded that behind the green face and the catchphrases, there was a real production team building a very specific kind of comedy spectacle. So, final verdict on The Mask, it's not a perfect movie. Let's just get that out of the way. The story is thin, the romance moves way too fast, the villain isn't exactly unforgettable on the page, and some of the humor is very much from that loud, goofy, early 90s comedy lane. There are moments where you can feel the movie stretching a small idea as far as it can possibly go. But the strange thing is, that almost doesn't matter, because The Mask has something a lot of cleaner, more polished comedies don't have. Personality, real personality. It has a look, a sound, a rhythm, a star performance, and a complete commitment to its own madness. This is not a movie trying to be tasteful. It is not trying to be subtle. It wants to be bright, ridiculous, fast, musical, cartoonish, and slightly insane, and it absolutely succeeds at that. Jim Carrey is the engine. Without him, I honestly don't think this film becomes the same cultural memory. He gives the movie its spark, its timing, its weirdness, and even a little bit of heart. As Stanley, he makes you care about this lonely guy who just wants to be seen. As the Mask, he becomes this unstoppable human cartoon, and somehow both sides feel connected. Cameron Diaz adds glamour and charm, the music gives the movie its swing, the effects still have that playful handmade energy, and the whole thing moves with this reckless confidence that's hard not to enjoy. Even when a joke doesn't fully land, the next one is already racing toward you, and that's why the movie holds up, not because every piece is flawless, but because the overall experience is so alive. It's silly, loud, occasionally messy, and completely over the top, but it's also imaginative, funny, and weirdly heartfelt in the right moments. For me, The Mask remains one of the defining comedies of the 1990s. It captures Jim Carrey at the perfect moment, introduces Cameron Diaz with real star power, and turns a simple comic book premise into a live-action cartoon that people are still quoting decades later. So no, it's not the deepest superhero movie, it's not the most sophisticated comedy, but as pure entertainment. As a burst of color, music, slapstick, and chaotic 90s energy, it's still smockin'.